Welcome back to the Contacts Coaching Podcast. We're joined today by Ray Moore, retired athletic director of many years and member of the CSADA board. Ray, thanks for jumping on today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, we're going to dive into some in-depth history here, I imagine. So why don't you take us through the background of how you ended up reverse engineering this, being on the CSADA board, but going all the way back to the beginning when you got into coaching and teaching and athletic administration, and just kind of take us through the journey all the way up until you finish.
Okay, I'll give you kind of the nickel tour. I actually finished up in college at Cal State Fullerton, where I was playing baseball and played a little football too. And I always wanted to teach and coach, but I wanted to play a little baseball first. And when I figured out that I couldn't hit the 85-mile-an-hour slider, my interest in coaching got a whole lot more involved. So I started teaching down in Fullerton in the actually 1973, and was in the Anaheim district for a few years when they had a full middle school or junior high, 7, 8, 9 at that time, sports program. And then moved, at that time, it was hard to get teaching jobs. So we moved around quite a bit, and I moved up to Fairfield, California, and taught at Armio High School. And then we had some success there and moved to Idaho. They hired our entire football staff to come to Nampa, Idaho. And we got a chance to turn things around there, but salaries leveled off. And then I came back to Southern California, where I was at Loera High School. And it's Loera is the closest high school to Disneyland. So that's where I started as an AD, and then went to Diamond Bar High School for 13 years there, and then got a chance to open a brand new school at Vista Murrieta High School in 2003, and then stayed there till 2015 when I retired. And then during that time too, I was a vice president on the CSADA board, and helped Tom Danley at the time, who was he was about everything. He did conference program, conference sites, everything. So I helped him with the program, and then Tom retired, and then I took over for him as a conference program chair, and have been doing that volunteer work, gosh, I'm going to say since about 2005. So here we are.
All right, well, we're going to dig into a couple of different things on here, and I'm going to go all over the place, but I want to start with when you got your start and they still had junior high school sports programs. And I'd love your take as you watched those go by the wayside. I'd love to know what your perspective is now looking back on the impact that losing those programs has had, both on high school athletics and community and culture, just as, your own anecdotal narrative of that.
Well, it's kind of sad to see middle school sports at that time in the 70s. We were in a tremendous budget crunch. Teachers were getting riffed, that had 8 years experience, and they were getting, their jobs, taken away. And to save money, they decided to eliminate middle school or junior high sports. At that time in the Anaheim district, they had 16 junior highs, and they had a full sports program. They had tackle football, they had basketball, they had wrestling, they had baseball, track and field. Now remember, this is prior to the beginning of Title IX, so it was mostly boys sports. But they had two 8-team leagues, 4 4-team divisions. They had playoffs, and then all the kids moved to the high schools in the district, and they had 8 high schools in that district at that time. And it was, on one side, it was really many high schools. They were just small high schools that ran the same programs. And then they went to 4-year high schools, and that's when they dropped all the athletic programs and made them like in 7th and 8th grade, like play days and intramurals. And I think it affected the middle schools tremendously, because they lost that sense of identity, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And it helped the high schools in some respects, because they got ninth graders on campus.
Mhm.
But the flip side is when you had two junior highs feeding a high school, you came in with two quarterbacks coming in. You came in with, an 10 offensive linemen that could probably play a little bit.
Mhm.
And now they're starting to get middle school athletics back, and we're excited about that. And we'll keep our fingers crossed as long as the money holds out within the state and the school districts promote it.
Yeah, as you're talking through that, I'm a little bit younger, but I even now as we have a pre-K through 12 and we have a middle school program and trying to coordinate league schedules, etc. Right? It's
Right,
not as clean as the high school setting for the most part because not all the schools have full sports programs, and
right,
nobody that I'm aware of in California has tackle football in middle school anymore, right? If in
right,
Texas you do, but that's gone by the wayside here. And so hearing that is fascinating because you're right. It benefited high schools a little bit by getting the ninth graders there, but you lose the competitive nature that they've already established at the middle
right,
school. And I'm thinking back to when I was younger. We had a full slate at my middle school. We didn't have football, but we had everything else, and we went
right,
and competed. And that's not always the case these days. So it's just interesting how those things, those programs, I don't want to say get deprioritized, but in reality, each district has to make these financial decisions
right.
that a lot of times are beyond their control. All right, I want to go from there. I want to go to you were playing baseball, a little bit of football, but then it sounds like you became a football coach. So talk a little bit about that decision.
Well, my primary sports were football and baseball. I coached a little bit of some other things, but I just started. There were openings, and to be a coach, you wanted to coach as many things as you can, make yourself more attractive as
Mhm.
a teacher. And I had really a combined major of physical education and social science.
Mhm.
So my credential was a physical education major, and at that time, back in the Stone Age, they have a minor.
Mhm.
So my minor was social science, so I could teach anything K through 12 in physical education,
Mhm.
and 7 through 12 in social science. So I wanted to coach, and football was always a priority. I played football in high school and college, and then baseball also,
Mhm.
and had a little bit of a time in the semi-pro and minor leagues, but that was a short stay.
So talk a little bit about evolving as a football coach. And you mentioned that you were in Fairfield. I went to UC Davis, so I know exactly
Yeah,
where it is. My buddy's the AD at Fairfield High School, actually.
sure.
And you were at Armio, which is at that time, the rival school. Now Rodriguez is open. There's three schools there.
Right.
Talk a little bit about the journey from, hey, we're going to hire you and your whole staff to come to a different state and what that was like and what you learned being in a different federation, association, what was similar, what was different, how you grew through that.
Well, we came in, to backtrack a little bit, at Armio. We came in as a staff, and I worked with a head coach that hired me, and then he was my assistant in baseball.
Mhm.
And we came in, and they had won two league games in the last 4 years, and they had a lot of work to do. We had some great kids, and just taught them a system. It wasn't necessarily us. It
Mhm.
was they needed leadership. They wanted leadership, and we were able to build that program. And that's why the Nampa High School came and asked us to. We had applied, but they asked us to come up and do the similar thing
Mhm.
at their school. And it took us 4 years. After the fourth year, they won a state championship, and it was interesting to get used to Idaho,
Mhm.
because one is, they don't care for Californians a whole lot. So you want to change your license plates as soon as you get there. That's what we found. Um, the housing prices were cheaper, and that was one of the reasons we went, so we could establish a family atmosphere,
Mhm.
and own a house. And it was one of those things where you were accepted if you tried to fit in.
Mhm.
If you just were, if you wanted to make everybody think you were, the all-knowing, all-seeing person, you wouldn't get along there. So
Mhm.
we had a great time. They were great people. They used to talk about traffic downtown Nampa, and that was 7 cars at a stoplight. you know. Um, it was the football stadium was great, and the baseball stadium was owned by the American Legion, and they charged us $1 a year to use it. And it was just fun. It was a small town, and the thing that we had to leave was the salary schedule topped out
Mhm.
at one level and just didn't go up. And it was either I had to, my wife get a job or I get a second job. And we had kids at the time. And, it was when I came back to California, I was making more money teaching physical education and coaching baseball and football than the superintendent was at Nampa,
Wow.
you know.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, that definitely is a motivator at some level. Let me ask a follow-up in regards to that, because what I'm really
yeah,
curious about is, as a coach and as an administrator, eventually, right when you came back, it's
right,
like,
right.
what did you learn in Idaho that you brought back with you that has been kind of a pillar of what you've done over these years that you wouldn't have been exposed to if you hadn't left the state?
Well, the first thing I learned was to take life at a slower pace.
Mhm.
And that helped us as a family, and that helped me really in athletics to focus on, I think, the personal level, the kids first, and their growth. I found that most high schools are pretty much the same athletically. You've got it's not where you go to Idaho and they can't, catch a ball or
Mhm.
anything. They really stress sports,
Mhm.
and that was a big deal. And then coming back to California, you know, California has that image of everything is better. If you're in Southern California, you're going to be, you're a better athlete. Well, they were the same athletes, and had the same needs, and you wanted to teach them to be, I think, instead of just the sport aspect, to be better people.
Mhm.
When you end this, are
Mhm.
you going to be the type of person that, what I always said was, what legacy do you leave as a senior?
Mhm.
Does somebody want to wear your number? That's the thing that would hit me. If somebody below, junior or sophomore or freshman wanted to wear your number because of the way you played the game and the way you treated people. And that's what my goal was, to be able to teach those kids that type of legacy.
So let me follow up on that. I often talk about how sports is just a vehicle to teach leadership and how to be part of something bigger than yourself. How have you seen that played out in your own career? What are some areas that you've been exposed to since retirement that you've seen people um, navigating that well, or some things that since you've retired and the new generation has kind of come in that you wish came back from that lens?
Well, I've seen some good athletes in my time. When you get to be old, I don't call it old anymore. We call it chronologically gifted. So we've seen some great kids that were not the best people to come through, until they got out of high school or got out of sport, and then they realized the impact that it really made. I liken it to, if you'll notice, all the players that played for John Wooden, they knew the pyramid of success, but they don't talk about it until after their playing days are over. They come back and say, "Now I know what it meant." So
Yeah.
the things we would talk to kids about is, are you a better person, in your involvement? Are you a team player, or do you play individually? Because the best group of athletes are not the best teams, as we find out in high school. And from your experience, the
Right.
best teams are the ones that fit together and really like and love each other. And then, as we got along, we had some great kids at all the schools I was involved in. They were better people than they were athletes,
Mhm.
and some of them were world class athletes.
Mhm.
And since I've retired, I've seen that the biggest obstacle I've seen was COVID.
Mhm.
And the mess we had in the state with regard to no school, and you know kids couldn't get the benefit of being around teachers and coaches. And I think the best teachers are coaches in the classroom. The
Mhm.
best coaches are teachers on the field and in the gym. They weren't around them. And then the same thing for coaches and teachers, they couldn't feed off the enthusiasm of the kids.
Mhm.
And to weather that, I think right now our group of athletic directors are probably tougher and more resilient than previous generations because they went through this.
Mhm.
Just my opinion. They're eager now to get better at what they do.
So, in regards to the time spent, right, and the clear value from our lens, right, as coaches
Yes.
and athletic directors, that sports plays in development of human beings. Um, what would you describe for people outside of our um, space, right? Because
Yeah.
you taught long enough to understand that there are other people on campus that look at you side eye that, hey, you guys just do sports and like, this is the important stuff, right? How do you
Right.
communicate that value as a chronologically gifted veteran to say, look, 50 years in this business, here's what I can tell you. Yeah, the academics is super important.
Yeah.
The way in which we mentor these kids in leadership is super important. But the way in which they are able to grow as human beings in athletics is so vastly different than anywhere else. It needs to be prioritized.
Yeah. Well, the best analogy I ever heard was a principal that hired me at Diamond Bar High School, Bob Corcoran. And Bob would say that a good comprehensive high school is like a table. And the four legs of that table represent academics, athletics, activities, and the arts. And if that table is balanced, all those legs are emphasized, all those areas are emphasized the same. No, if you overemphasize athletics or academics, you've got a table that's uneven and it will not survive. So that balanced, the four A's we would call it.
Mhm.
I think that's the key. You say academics and athletics are and arts and activities equal importance. We want kids involved in all those things. We want you to get the best grades you can.
Mhm.
If your best is a C, then go get a C. But if
Mhm.
your best is an A, then you're cheating yourself and everybody around you if you get less. Get involved. Be involved in athletics. We all want multi-sport athletes.
Mhm.
Every school, I don't care how big you are.
Mhm.
We want kids that are involved in student government.
Mhm.
We want them to be well-rounded. When we opened Vista Murrieta High School, we had a great principal who his goal was to not have a kid slip through the cracks. Every kid should benefit, whether it's a teacher at lunch, and we don't want him to be a 7:30 to 2:30 kid. Those were our hours at the time. Things have changed since then, obviously.
Yep.
But we didn't want him just going to school and leaving. We wanted him to identify. Don't let a kid. His question was always, how do you refuse to let a kid fail?
Mhm.
You know, and that I think it's got equal importance. You've got all kinds of kids that will benefit from athletic involvement, but don't make that the only thing.
Right.
And the problems that have arisen
Mhm.
with athletics being, I think, overemphasized is, I just say it, my involvement and my experience looking at and being involved in travel sports.
Yeah, I don't want to go down that soapbox, coach.
Yeah,
That rabbit hole, so to speak, because I have strong feelings about that as well, and the way in which it is negatively impacting the greater good that we're trying to cultivate through
I
athletics.
agree. I agree.
So while it does have a place, and I will acknowledge that, I do not want to go down that rabbit hole because I do that on every episode. So I'm going to stop. Let me ask this question: as a mentor, as a guy that's done it for a long time and is retired, air quotes, what are what are the most consistent, I guess is the right word, most regular questions you get asked from people in my role that are still actively working in the profession, right? When they see you, when they interact with you at conference, just, hey, here's what I'm wrestling with. What do you see
Yeah.
that being for newer administrators getting in? What would you say are the most important things you're still dealing with today that people are asking?
Well, I still do some consulting work with new ADs that get hired and want to know the lay of the land. Um, I always talk to them about what the information that I got early in my career from some great athletic directors. One is ask questions. If you've got issues, go find somebody that you can trust and ask them how they handle things. And most athletic directors will not tell you, well, here's how we do it. They'll say, have you thought about doing it this way?
Mhm.
Um, I think that's a key. You got to be an open learner ready to go, and you got to steal things. If it works at one place, why won't it work at yours?
Yep.
And I was of the opinion that somebody told me once, if you try something new and it works, then it's your idea, it's your campus, so it becomes your idea. If you try something that doesn't work, you blame it on the person you stole it from, and it didn't work there, so okay. But and another important item is, on every campus, you've got the movers and the shakers that will be in your corner,
Mhm.
and you've got movers and shakers that don't like athletics.
Mhm.
Okay, so your job is to find ways to neutralize those movers and shakers against you.
Yep.
And the best way to do it is you focus on academics, you focus on daily attendance, you focus on attitude, because the first person, if there's a baseball player in a class that's giving a teacher trouble, the first I used to get a call and say, hey, I got a baseball player, it's a problem. So I'd say, okay. I'd call the baseball coach and I'd say, get in touch with Miss Smith. And he gets in touch with her, and it's taken care of immediately. It's the final thing, and I won't belabor the point, is you've also got trusted mentors or trusted staff members on your campus that you should run ideas by. Early in my career, I made some decisions and did some things with regard to policies, and I didn't do that. And it wasn't well received, although it worked most of the time, because I had coached. So
Mhm.
it wasn't like I was coming into the job cold. But when I found out these people that were trusted in the staff, and I trusted them, when I said, I've checked with our committee, our coaches committee, and they endorse this,
Yep.
that really makes a huge difference.
Yep.
And it doesn't seem like you're just inventing things that you want to do.
No, I love all three of those. And I think the number one, ask questions should be self-evident. I joke with new employees that come here that you have 2 years to play the new guy card. And
Yeah.
I tell them in every meeting, hey, I'm the new guy. Can you tell me why we're doing this? Like, just so
Yeah.
I can be on board. And it's so valuable because ultimately it gives you insight into the mission and the vision of the institution. And like, are
Yes.
you a mission appropriate fit? And if not, how do you become that? Right. And then the second piece, I think you're dead on, right? There are people that are on board and they believe in athletics, and there are people that think it's a waste of time. And your word to neutralize them, I think is important because often that voice gets more attention than it deserves, right? And
Right.
ultimately, it's like, how do you not combat it, but how do you help educate, right? How do you help bring people into the fold to support you? And then that last piece, right? Being able to say, hey, I've checked with the coaches committee, right? It's the informal places of power within the campus, right? The
Yeah.
informal way in which that percolates out. And what I joke with some of my AD colleagues in doing this is uh, there's a certain aspect of politics that comes with any of these leadership roles because you are constantly trying to get people on board, right? And persuade the naysayers. And to what you just said, figuring out some strategies. well, hey, if these are the people, both men and women, that are
Right.
the informal power and authority at the campus, I need
Right.
to be bored, or you're running into that brick wall.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. I was a history major at the time, and I always, go back to history. And they call it the kitchen cabinet that presidents had. They had informal advisors that
mhm,
kept them on track.
mhm.
So
Well, talk a little bit about how your approach to politics has changed over the course of your career. And I don't mean national politics. I mean
right,
in
right.
the within the school building, right? Where you're trying to get something done, or I am, and it might be received better from someone else, right? Or you might need to whip some votes before you go into the room. And I think that's something that is often underappreciated and misunderstood while sitting in this seat or a head coach's seat or an assistant coach's seat, right? Talk a little bit about how that impacts your ability to find success.
Well, I think anytime you want to adjust or change a protocol or a policy, you got to find support first. You can't just go out and be vocal about it, or get it out where it becomes a major issue, because you're going to have pluses and minuses. You're going to have people that detract from it, and people that support it. You got to find the right people. Your kitchen cabinet, your group of coaches, and other people on campus that say, yeah, this is good for kids. What's ultimately good for kids? That's what we're after.
Mhm.
Why do we have these things? I'll give you an example. There was a movement at one time in our area to eliminate athletic programs. I don't know if you guys have them at your school, but we had a block schedule. We had sixth period was girls athletics, and we had seventh period with boys athletics, and they met every other day like that.
Right.
So there were teachers that were, they were the ones that hang out in the teachers lounge at lunch and complain. That's why I never
I've
go
stayed
into.
out of that area my
Yeah,
entire career from day one.
yeah, stay out of the teachers lounge. But those people say, well, yeah, let's get rid of athletic period. And I went to the few of the leaders and I said, okay, let's say we do that. Okay, sixth period, we've got 450 young ladies involved. Where are they going to go?
Mhm.
What classes? We don't have any more classrooms on our campus. So you're teaching whatever it was, let's say geometry, and your class is now 22 sixth period. You know why it's 22? Because we've got those 450 girls, and then 500 boys in
Mhm.
seventh period, and you want to get rid of those classes. Where are those kids going to go?
Mhm.
I said, oh, I never thought of that. Huh. Okay, so now they don't have that pulpit to stand on, to say we get rid of this and we'll save all this money.
Mhm.
And we go through, periodically the Teachers Association negotiates for funds and everything.
Mhm.
And what we did was put together, and I stole this from someone. I wish it was my idea, but it was another school. We took the average GPA of a non-athlete, the average GPA of an athlete. At our school, it was pretty good. 2.9 for the non-athlete,
Mhm.
3.3 for the athlete.
Mhm.
We took the number of days you missed and absences.
Mhm.
It was 1.5 with the athletes, because
Mhm.
the coaches said, hey, you don't feel good? No big deal. Come to school.
Mhm.
You know, Tough. You come to practice. For the non-athlete, it was like 4 or 5 days.
Mhm.
So we equated that to money. How much
Mhm.
money per day per athlete? You got three more days a year for every athlete. So it equated to like $11 million in our school district, which has a large school district.
Mhm.
And then the teachers association, well, we never knew that. So, okay, now you got it. Do you
Mhm.
understand?
Mhm.
Does that change your view on eliminating athletics at the high school level?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Mhm.
Okay, so I don't know if that answered your question, but I think finding support before you go in. I don't know how your section works completely when you change bylaws and things like that. But in the southern section, they have all the leagues. They have 80 something leagues
Mhm.
and every league has a vote.
Mhm.
So when you have a proposal, one thing I learned is you go in, and when the proposal is made, you make sure you have somebody to second it. They've
Mhm.
committed to seconding that proposal. If
Mhm.
you go in alone, you may never not get that second, and it may die.
Yep.
So the preparation is the key.
Yeah, you answered the question because ultimately it's designed to help myself selfishly and
Yeah,
anyone else that's listening how to problem solve, right? And it's like, hey,
yeah,
I want to get this accomplished. Okay, well, what's the resistance you're going to face? How are you accounting for that? How are you getting allies before you bring it to the larger group where it's going to get voted on or it's going to get approved?
right,
And I think that's often missed, and then people are frustrated, and it's like nobody listens to me. It's like, well, what work did you do on the front end to
right,
educate? And I think what you just shared, something that was probably really complicated to figure out, but changed a district's decision to eliminate athletic PE, right? It is one
yeah,
of these situations where, had you gone in without that information, that thing's dead on arrival. And so I think
right.
ultimately the process of figuring out decision making, change management, all of those things is what's important for all of us.
And I think I learned a lot too in that. I learned more about the financial part of it than I had thought. It's just great for kids. Kids are better athletes, are better people. No, let's get down to the money because that's what it came down to.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that's the important takeaway is how are you getting educated on how things work
Right.
constantly? And um, this isn't important, but I had a text exchange with a guy the other day that I know really well that posted something on Twitter about playoffs. And I just shot him a note off thread and I was like, hey man, look, I'm happy to talk this through, but here's some things that factor into those decisions. If you want to
Right.
talk, give me a call. And it's like ultimately he was appreciative, wanted to be educated on it, but that information is not readily accessible. And therefore, in your seat, right, as the AD or as the coach, how are you educating yourself to the areas that ultimately affect your level of improvement, right? So
Right.
you definitely answered the question. Uh, I would love to know through all your experience, what are the things that you feel are the best that you do that affect the culture at your place? And specifically, you got to open a new school, right? So here's my
Right.
toolbox of all this stuff I've learned. And here are going to be the pillars that we lean on. What are those things that you offer for other people?
Well, when we open the new school, you got to understand a couple things. One is um, you got nobody to blame if something doesn't go right. You can't say, okay, well, the way, they did it in the past like this and they, at an older school. You do the best you can to get it right and you go from there. And our principal at the time came in with an acronym when the acronym was CLASS, CLASS, character, leadership, attitude, scholarship, and service. And that's everything you do in athletics. It was like I was home, and we were able to focus that, and we actually taught in the first day of school. They had 5 classes that they met that day. So the first class they emphasized character, then leadership, then attitude, scholarship, service. And at the end of the day, every kid at the school was indoctrinated at least a little bit on what our mission is.
Mhm.
And then it was, as I told you, we didn't want to lose any kids. We wanted them all to be involved in what they're doing. So we tried to get the students involved in everything we did. Remember, we had school colors and a mascot because that was picked by the school board,
Mhm.
but we didn't have a varsity letter. We only have freshmen and sophomores to start with.
Yep.
And we didn't have a jacket. So we had the kids decide on that. They designed, and we had 60 designs. The kids came into the athletic office and voted on the letter. And then we got to the staff and said, especially band director, activities, um, student government clubs, everything. We said, this letter, and it was designed by a cross country girl. It really wasn't a very good cross country girl, but she was a good artist. And we said, we want this letter out. We want as many kids wearing this varsity jacket and varsity letter as we possibly can in our community.
Mhm.
They said, well, you just don't want it for athletics? Well, no. the band is the hardest working group on campus. They're out there all the time. Cheerleading maybe second,
Yep.
because of their hard work. But we want, drama. We want that emblem. Will designate what they lettered in, but we want great kids wearing those jackets. And they designed the jacket too. Um, the we had staff. You got to have help with this. It's not just the athletic directors you found. You got to find people. We had a couple of teachers that were interested in starting a student cheer group. They called them. Our mascot was a Bronco, so they started the Bronco Bleacher Creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, there's 1,000 kids showing up,
Mm-hmm.
and these teachers are leading them, and that became the key on campus. The first place, it was tradition. The first place that it was started by the coaches, the first place the football team went after the game was over to the band, which was in the end zone, and cheered them. And then they went to the BBC, the Bronco Bleacher Creatures, and let them know they appreciate them being there. Win or lose, that's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then a tradition was started. Our freshman football coach at the time said, well, we'll get the freshman football team out to help the custodians, and they'll go through and the bleachers and everything, and they'll clean up all the big things, and they'll pick up all the pads and the yard markers, and those traditions kind of started what we were doing. And it certainly wasn't me. It
Right.
was everybody bought into that class acronym that we're gonna try to do something special.
Mm-hmm.
What I stole again was, we want to be a world-class high school.
Yep.
If you're not trying to be as a school, if you're not trying to be world class, why not?
Yeah.
And if you don't reach that, okay, you're still going to be pretty good, I think.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And I think it's right on in regards to figuring out a way to have reminders of what you believe in and who you are. And I think ultimately, like you said, you had an acronym, you were able to create the culture with the jackets. People started picking up and coming up with ideas on their own. And then it snowballs from there. And I think it's important as we sit in these roles, right? Like here are the core pillars of who we are. And then
Yeah.
everything can be pointed back to that. And that then allows each team to operate within the space of, as long as it's connected to that mission and vision. Let me go here. As a football and baseball coach, what did you learn throughout your career by watching non-baseball and football practices, games, etc., that you were able to bring into your own coaching?
Well, you mean other sports, etc.? Yeah.
Or band
Yeah.
or whatever
Yeah.
else. Those things that I think we get tunnel vision and we don't look
Yeah.
outside of our area of expertise.
Well, I learned more from the band, I think, than I thought I would. Our band director, Diamond Bar, was great. On Wednesday nights, I used to practice in the stadium under the lights, and I would go down after my day was over and just sit in the press box and just listen to him and all the organization on what they did. Their preparation, and I think in any successful activity, your preparation done beforehand is gonna be the key to what you do. Sometimes you'll get lucky if you don't prepare, but by and large, your preparation dictates how well your team and your group's going to do. I would watch them. I'd go to classes also, and people would say, "Hey, this guy's a great teacher." I said, "Okay, why?" And what I got from that is, the best teachers, the kids bought into what they were doing and had some type of input.
Mm-hmm.
I learned from Jeff Jansen. I don't know if you're familiar with Jeff Jansen's books and the Jansen Peak Performance
Mm-hmm.
Institute. Uh, we went to a series of goal setting with the kids, with all our teams, and I would kind of lead it with all our teams. And what we found was that the coaches didn't have to discipline anymore, because the teams had designed their own discipline system.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're going to practice every day just like we plan to play. And
Mm-hmm.
if they didn't, the coaches would just tell them, said, today we haven't practiced well. We can either end practice now, or we can restart and do it the way you're supposed to do it. And many times I think 100% they said, no, we'll restart. We set this goal. We're going to do it this way,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know? So I don't just limit it. Like I say, I steal things all the time from good coaches and teachers.
Well, that's the goal, right? How are you
Yeah.
constantly evolving? How are you constantly learning and borrowing from others? And in that vein, one of the things I usually ask is, how have you most recently, what is something you have most recently changed your mind on? Meaning, I used to believe this, now I'm over here, and here's why.
Well, I still coach our. We have two grandsons. We have three grandsons, and one of them's in high school now, and he's playing baseball. And the other two are baseball players on a 14U team. They're 14 and 12. So I've coached them. I've coached all those kids in travel ball, and we've had that group together for about 5 years. And I've gone away from the more command aspect.
Mhm.
Here's how we're doing it. We're going to do it this way now. Toughen up, to just be quiet and let them play.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that took a while. Probably I didn't do it as well with our kids when my daughter and son were younger as a parent. But I'm a lot better coach as a grandparent because I just kind of let it happen now,
Mhm.
and then we'll come back to it and say, okay, what could we have done better? And they usually understand it
Mhm.
and get it. Said, okay, so we can work on this at practice. Here's what we can get better at. You said it. Here's what I think we need to do, and here's how we'll go about it.
Mhm. So, how would you offer that advice to people that are earlier in career to help them hack what you've learned in
Yeah.
your more experienced phase?
I used to, as a young coach, the post game talk was always, it was more frustration and emotion coming out. I
Mhm.
eliminated that almost completely. We would get together as a team, and our we had two really kind of mantras. One is, it's how we play, not who we play.
Mhm.
That was number one. And the other thing was, we all share in a win, we all share in a loss. We're not going to say, okay, you guys, boy, I coach well, but you guys played bad. It wasn't that way. I didn't prepare you well enough for you to play good. So somewhere in there, I've got to change what I'm doing too.
Yeah.
So the post game talk, we make it as simple as possible, where kids just will finish up. And if you do the little things right, you're probably going to be fairly successful if you've got a couple kids. And if you have a great team, get out of their way. Make sure they come to practice on time, practice hard, play hard, and get out of their way.
Mhm.
Don't
Mhm.
overcoach them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I'm in that phase right now of the last handful of years being much more, hey, you guys got to lead, and this is going to come from you. And I think what you just said at the end is, how do you balance that idea of where they are on the spectrum of novice to being really good, right? And
Yeah,
it's you can do more harm than good when you have a ton of talent. And it's something that I think is not believed by everyone, and it's something
right.
that you got to kind of figure out as you go, because one of the most talented teams I had, where we ended up winning a section title, was like I was just managing egos. Like the
Yeah.
X's and O's piece, it had very little impact in the big picture of things.
And that was girls basketball, right?
It
Was
was
that
boys back
boys?
then,
Yeah.
but it's also some of the things you do regardless of
Yeah.
sport, depending on talent level. The other thing I think is important, I'd love to hear your take on this, is clear role definition, which I think gets missed a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's something that we all struggle with. Everybody would like to play all the time, but there's a role that everybody has. Football, we kind of solved that. I don't know if it completely, but you know how when you have a good game and kids play well, everybody gets those stickers on their helmets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was always well and good, but then it kind of dawned on me. It takes me a while, but it dawned on me, the scout team offense, the defense, so they could shut out the opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Why not award the scout team offense those stickers too.
Mhm.
Punt block team, went up against the scout punt team and all those different phases of the game that you have. Why not recognize those practice players? And all of a sudden they started getting better.
Mhm.
I had worked for a really great head coach, a number of them, but I worked directly with him, and he had specialists.
Mhm.
So the specialists during a game would come in, and we had a lot of two-way players. So they would be, let's say, on offense. So the specialists would go in, and as long as we were moving the ball and scoring, they'd stay in the game.
Hmm.
So that gave the other kids that were two-way players a rest,
Mhm.
and they came back in fresh on the opposite, side of the field. But
Mhm.
these guys really took it to heart that we're the specialists and we're going in and we determine how long we stay in the game.
Mhm.
So,
No, I love that. And I think we're always looking for ways to be creative and acknowledge and keep people involved. And
yeah,
doing things like that is something I would invite anybody to listen to. I'm going to take that back to our group and just ask them, hey, how can we find specialized ways for each of these kids to contribute, be it on the scout team, be it as somebody that's going in for this particular thing, and then acknowledge that in the way in which y'all have
yeah,
decided. All right, let me ask this last question. It's kind of a setup since you're super involved, but how would you say your involvement in associations like the CSADA or
yeah.
others can benefit other people looking to grow in this industry?
Well, if I always learned early and from good mentors that clinics can help you, and our conference is designed to help. Let me backtrack a little bit. Our board of 30 people, we have an executive board of about 10 and then 20 vice presidents from around the area and representatives from around the state. They're all volunteers. These
Mhm.
people don't get paid for anything.
Mhm.
The reason we all are in it is to give back to our profession. And I don't think people understand that completely, probably because we don't do a great job of publicizing ourselves. Most athletic directors are behind the scenes people.
Mhm.
They will, I've always likened it to the two types of principals, and ADs are the same way. One AD and they're both good. One AD grabs a flag and leads a parade. The other AD will stand back and pushes people forward to get that recognition.
Mhm.
Both can be good. What we try to do is, promote involvement. We want athletic directors, no matter what their experience is, to come to the conference and meet other athletic directors, ask questions, come with questions.
Mhm.
I learned this at football clinics. We found out a team at a school ran what we ran, and I didn't care if they were speaking or not. We said, can we take you to lunch and ask you about your system?
Yep.
Same idea, you
Yep.
know. Just to kind of piggyback on that, I'm working on it now. Even though the 2025 conference is, months and months away, we try to get this done by hopefully the end of June.
Yep.
So we're working on good speakers, and we base it on, I've got all the board review. Our board does a review, and it's about 4 or 5 pages. And what they do is I ask them, name no more than 3 things that we do well, but then give me all the improvements we can make. There's unlimited numbers of those.
Yep.
And then we have the evaluations compiled from our attendees, and we go through those. And we try to make it better every year so that if you've been an athletic director for 20 years, you come in and there's still something of value that you'll get from this. Now, it might be that you get recharged on those 3 days.
Yep.
You get to play golf and be around friends. That's all well and good. I like that part too. But I come and I listen to the speakers, and I want to make sure that there's something that I get from every speaker. And if you don't get it and you're still interested, contact that person.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid to call them.
Mhm.
I'll give you an example. I just finalized Jeff Jansen is going to be one of our keynote speakers this coming year.
Mhm.
He does a great job with team concept. and all kinds of leadership qualities and captains. You know, he does. He's going to talk about team captains, where many schools allow you have team captains, but they only think it's for the coin flip. You know, what are your team captains doing? What's their leadership? You
Right.
know, so I think it's important to be at every conference that you can. And if you don't get the information from the speakers, it's incumbent upon you as the athletic director. You go find answers to your questions.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think that's important. And the invitation is there for everyone listening. Reach out and ask people that you see speak. Reach out and invite yourself to have conversations with people that you meet. We were just talking before we got on about one of my prior guests who was a fascinating visit that I had with him. Just reached out and said, "Hey, I want to come on the pod." And it was like awesome. And I think that invitation is there, even if it's not spoken. So those of you that
Yes.
are listening, you're hearing it from both of us. Reach out. People want to take time and to talk about what they do and to share their wisdom. So don't miss that opportunity when it presents itself. That's all I got, Coach. Anything else?
Well, no, I appreciate the opportunity, and congratulations on your State AD of the Year award. I think that's certainly well deserved, and you know, as I told you before, it's a special group of people, and you're just awestruck when you get one of those awards to say that somebody recognized what you were doing was important. And I would encourage all athletic directors, set that as your professional goal. You know, be the athletic director of the year. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, I was humbled and honored to receive that, and I think having the mindset that you attack every day, the way in which you described, to chase excellence, maybe recognition comes, maybe it doesn't, but at the end of the day, you're going to help your kids, you know, get whatever that they're trying to chase. So
For
appreciate
sure.
you sharing that, and
Well, thank you.
looking forward to talking to you soon.
Me too. Take care. Thank you very much, Justin.